everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Today is Not Tomorrow. With me, I have a very special guest, Melissa Kilby. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mofi. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and have this talk with me. You are my first guest speaker, which is so exciting.
It's an incredible honor.
I'm honoured to have you because you are setting the bar for how inspiring and motivating the ongoing lineup of guests will be, and I hope things just keep getting better and better. You're also helping me kick off my theme, Letters to Self, which will involve you writing a letter to your future self at the end of this talk, sharing your words of wisdom to me, future you, and my listeners. So thank you. For those who don't know Melissa is the Executive Director of Girl Up, a United Nations foundation, and so much more. I'd love for you to explain a bit about who you are, what Girl Up is, and what you do.
Great. Well, again, my name is Melissa Kilby. It is my incredible honor to run Girl Up and to have been a part of this team for the last 9 years. We celebrated the 10th anniversary of Girl Up just this last month. So, it really has been such a journey. I joined Girl Up when it was just turning 1 year old, and it was just an idea. And now to see it as the global movement that it has grown into, I'm just incredibly proud. So I am based in the United States. Our Girl Up team is mostly headquartered in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in the middle of the U.S. in a small rural town. My family is like decades and decades and generations of farmers. And I think that one of the reasons that I was so drawn to Girl Up is that I wish that I had had something like this when I was younger, that I had had this exposure to different people. So it's definitely part of how I grew up is a big reason why I do this work and why I was searching for work like this. So a little bit more about Girl Up. As I mentioned, we were launched 10 years ago. We are hosted at the United Nations Foundation, and the UN Foundation is a U.S.-based organization that partners with the UN, really with a main focus on advocating for U.S.-UN strength in that partnership and collaboration, but we also really work to bring attention and to bring communities and constituencies and conversations around sort of the most pressing global issues. So the UN Foundation focuses on women and girls, global health, climate, and climate change and all of the advocacy around that, as well as, again, that's very specific US-UN advocacy that happens in DC. So the UN Foundation launched Girl Up as an effort to bring awareness to the issues that were impacting adolescent girls around the world, particularly in developing countries. And we launched with the idea of really bringing resources, attention, advocacy, and policies to to benefit our UN partners, and to really try to help support girls in other parts of the world who are trying desperately to get an education, to be counted, to live a life free from violence, to have access to health, resources, and information. From that, we have developed into this not only adolescent girl focused initiative, but really broader than that as a gender equality movement. And as girls learned about Girl Up, started clubs, started to take action and really lean into the idea that, as a teenager, as a young woman, they have a voice, they have power, they have important opinions and perspectives, and the fact that they could use all of those assets and all of those skills to actually try to make the situation more equal and potentially better for their sisters around the world, but also for themselves. So it's been incredible to see us evolve into an organization that now has Girl Up clubs in 126 countries. We've inspired more than 4,000 girl-led clubs. Through our events, through our clubs, through our online community, we've engaged with 75,000 girls at this point. And so those are all girls committed to using their voice, to using their own sort of power, their agency and their autonomy, to fight for gender equality and to stand side by side within this global community to really work to try to make realities better and different for other girls.
Yeah. Well, as you said, you have impacted so many girls' lives that the numbers continue to increase and reach different parts of the world. And 1 year in, when you started, did you imagine you would impact as many people as you now have?
I think the honest answer to that is probably not. I probably wasn't thinking that yet. When we launched Girl Up, it was very much a U.S. facing campaign. And we hadn't really even begun to dream about the global potential. It was very much, how do we get this off the ground? How do we get legs under it? How do we get girls involved? How do we get it funded? How do we get some of that sustainability and some of that foundation? And I think in that first year, we were really still trying to find what was the right mix. What were the actions that teen girls wanted to take? What were the issues that they wanted to learn more about? How did they want to lead us forward? And so, I always knew it had so much potential. And I think every year that we sort of continued to exist as Girl Up, and that we continued to grow, and we continued to see girls come to the movement, even as teen girls were changing, we were able to evolve with them and allow this movement to grow and evolve as the world changed. I think that's when we really started to understand the potential. And I still feel, even with all of those numbers, that we have just scratched the surface, because there's still so many girls that don't know about Girl Up. I mean, our world is huge. And when you look at the potential, in the UK where you are, in the US, we still don't, not everyone knows about Girl Up. So we're still young, which makes me just incredibly excited. I think today I understand the potential, and I feel like those numbers could be quadruple in the next 10 years, and that this can really be something even more powerful than it is today, because we know it's going to take time, and it's going to take all of us to actually start to see equality in the aspects of our lives that are most important to us as women. So I know the fight is nowhere near done, and we need to keep growing, and we need to keep evolving. And so I hope that this is just the beginning, that the potential is even more than we've seen realized today.
I agree with you entirely, and I can't wait to see how much more Girl Up expands and the different lives it will reach. I definitely believe that Girl Up clubs and coalitions should be in every school, every town, every country, everywhere, because they change lives. You watch people grow and gain confidence, and they are educated and being inquisitive and asking questions about norms that socially are deemed as normal but aren't, and they are able to question these things. In terms of expanding Girl Up, how do you plan on going forward, and how do you plan on making sure that Girl Up is accessible for girls everywhere?
It's a great question, and it's one that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about and working on strategies and plans, and, talking to other organizations. I think the fact that we have clubs in 126 countries, we have 5 global staff members, and everybody else is in DC and in the US. And I know that's one thing that needs to evolve. We need to be able to support these networks of our club communities, if not in every country, then certainly regionally. And we also need to ensure that we're providing the right resources that can be adapted based on where you are in the world, because we know that, one, being a girl it's not a universal experience regardless of where you are in the world. But then when you take in geographic variances, religion, culture, tradition, all the things that make our national experience and sort of unique, absolutely need to be taken into account as we think about what can Girl Up impact, and how should girls engage with the sort of core tenets of Girl Up. One of the things we're really focused on as an organization is making sure that we have strong programming, a really good platform to connect girls globally, but also resources that can be adapted, that can be translated, both for language, but also for what's happening, where you are in the world, and what are the major gender equality issues that are impacting girls disproportionately in your town, in your community, in your country. I think that the beauty of Girl Up and the reason that we have been as successful as we've been for the last 10 years is because there is so much flexibility and there's so much autonomy and independence for our girl leaders of what exactly they choose to tackle. If it's girls' education, if it's gender-based violence, if it's equal representation in elected officials and positions, if it's wanting to see more women in leadership, if it's wanting to have access to menstrual products and reproductive, health services and information, wherever that sort of falls for you individually, for your club, for your community, you can actually engage with Girl Up and the mission, but narrow in on aspects of gender equality that are most important to you. Mental health, even climate change, which we don't talk about straight on, but there's a gender component to every aspect of our lives. And so that means that with your Girl Up Club, you can actually advocate on really many, many of the things that you care about and that you're passionate about. And I think for us, in order to really support a growing global movement, we need to continue to give the basics of those resources, but allow for that flexibility to continue to be, very much a part of the Girl Up experience, while also making sure that we're helping to support the structure, right, and the clubs and the communities and the girls themselves. And so that's where we're sitting right now, trying to figure out what all that looks like, but really focused on making sure we're starting with solid resources.
And it's amazing. The work that Girl Up do, as you've listed so many different movements and so many different areas that are accessible for girls and for people who join the movement to then go ahead and actively fight for, to make change in. We've recently touched on Girl Up turning 10. Happy birthday. Not to you, but
yes.
10 years has been a really long time. I know that you have accomplished so much, and I know that there have been struggles, and I'm sure roller coasters, lots of memories. I'd love to know what a few of your most precious memories have been over the past few years.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there's a couple moments that stand out for me. I think early on in my experience with Girl Up, my first weekend with our teen advisory board, when I first joined, it was about 2 months after I started. So it was our second class of teen advisors. This is when we were still 100% US for our teen advisory board, but we all got together. We were in San Francisco, and I got to meet 16 of just the most incredible young women that I had, to that date, I was 2 or 3 months into the job, and I got to spend the weekend with these young women and hear about their passion for girls' education, for girls' equality. Many of them had read Half the Sky by Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wooden, and that was one of the sort of things that got them interested in Girl Up and in girls' education. And I just remember just feeling so inspired for the future and really understanding what was possible. If I could keep this movement alive and moving and growing, and more of these girls who cared so much could come together and find each other and create that support system within themselves, and then if we could be a part of shaping, their power and their sort of identity as activists and advocates and leaders, it was just such a moment of inspiration. And that's a feeling that I have held in my heart, and it sort of fully encompasses why this work is so important to me, is that has been the through line for 9 years of being so hopeful and inspired by your generation, the girls that I've met over these last 9 years, and having this feeling of that being so different than even when I grew up, and I'm older than you. I'm not that much older than you, but a few decades, and it's remarkable, the difference. And so that gave me a lot of hope, and I very much remember that weekend. Another memory of mine was the first time I traveled to visit our UN impact partners. I went to Guatemala and brought some of our donors and a few of our girl leaders, and we went into the western highlands of Guatemala, very rural, indigenous communities who were in the program that we were funding through our fundraising efforts and our girls' fundraising efforts was ensuring that girls had access to education, had access to health, were learning about sort of their bodily autonomy and their rights, to be free from violence. It was amazing. I remember in that trip, they learned the concept of violence through this program. They didn't have a name. They had experienced it, but they couldn't even name it to actually tell somebody or to advocate for that to go away or to report it. There was actually no word in their language. Nobody had ever said, this is or isn't right, you should or should not experience this, until they were part of a program that was teaching them their rights to be free from that experience. And I just remember just that experience really opened my mind and my heart and my eyes to just how we are all so similar as girls and women. The light and the spirit and the energy and the happiness and the joy was incredibly familiar. But the reality of the experience was so far away from what I knew up until that trip that I really understood the need and the disparity and the difference based on where you were born and what you have access to as a right and what you have to fight for just a basic right. That trip was absolutely transformational. And then my last memory, and then I could probably talk about memories for like 45 minutes. So I will just share one more. Okay. In 2015, it was our 4th annual leadership summit, but we were getting ready to celebrate our 5th birthday. And we were at the leadership summit in Washington, D.C., and we were at a hotel across the street from the White House, and Michelle Obama spoke in person at that leadership summit. And I remember my memory is, of course, I got to meet her again. I think that was the second time I had met her, and that was amazing. But that wasn't actually the memory that stands out. I was standing on the side of the ballroom, and I watched our Girl Up leader, Lucia Ortega, introduce the First Lady. She walked out onto stage, and there were 200 girls in the room, and it could have been 20,000 at a concert arena. The sheer volume, the energy, the love, the excitement, this woman, this role model, the reaction of the girls at that event live in person, I burst into tears, blubbering, sobbing, it just came out. I didn't even know. And as I reflected, I remember just being so proud that we had built Girl Up into an initiative that was worthy of the First Lady, Michelle Obama, coming in person to speak. It was such a moment of just credibility and sort of that stamp of her approval and her time and her participation that she felt like this was an organization worthy of being there in person. And then the girls getting to have that experience was amazing. But my own personal pride, right, of getting Girl Up to that point. And it was truly, to this day, probably the most emotional that I've ever been at Girl Up. I've had some other moments, of course, but that was one of those ugly cry where you're I'm at my work, this is my event, I'm a leader, and I'm just on the side sobbing. But I was overcome. I was overcome with pride and excitement. And again, that was just 5 years in. And I was like, gosh, we're only 5 years old. We have so much more we can do and grow. And of course, now 10 years, we have, grown, and we're still here, and we're still living up to that sort of approval that she gave us. And really, we've grown so much even in those 5 years since that moment. But that was just an incredible memory.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing about how you've grown, and all of these memories, they are stuff that you can think about and reflect on, and it just makes you want to keep on working, keep on pushing. And you are definitely receiving this recognition Girl Up during the Leadership Summit, you had the likes of Michelle Obama again, Sheryl Sandberg, Hillary Clinton, Meghan Markle, just to name a few. Girl Up has the approval of so many because they are able to see the magnificent change in the lives of so many that you are able to change. And I just want to go back a little bit to when you were talking about your first weekend with these teen advisors. When did you decide that you wanted to go on and create a board of teen advisors, and what exactly are they? What do they do?
So the Teen Advisory Board as an idea precedes me. So it was actually in place before we launched Girl Up. It was actually one of the original tenets of Girl Up that is still so key to how we operate. And as we were finalizing a logo, a name, colors, there was a Teen Advisory Board weighing in. So, in that first year, it was kind of pulled from just girls that the staff knew, kind of pulled together as nobody knew of Girl Up. There wasn't actually an organization to apply to. And so the board was pulled together of folks that we knew. And when I joined, again, a year in September of 2011, our second class was just kicking off. And that was actually the first time girls had applied to be a part of the board. And so, that sort of level up of, okay, I already care about these issues. I'm leading in some aspect of my life already. And so you're coming into this board, not, already sort of like on board, with this work. And so the Teen Advisory Board is now global. I think our current class hails from 9 countries. It's 25 girls, and we elect a new board class every single school year, kind of based on the school cycle. But it kicks off in June and wraps up in May, and then we go through another selection cycle, and we're on our 11th class of teen advisors now. I think it's about 160 girls who have served on this board. It is a high school age board, so that is the sort of age parameter, but it is open and global, and it's a rigorous application process. As you can imagine, when you have 4,000 clubs and you've engaged with 75,000 girls, to date, but maybe 10 to 15,000 a year who are active in their clubs and in these events. It is a selective group, but it doesn't mean you have to be, so seasoned with Girl Up. We always bring in folks who are newer to Girl Up, but maybe have been involved in other organizations because it brings in such a nice, fresh perspective. But I think the thing that's most important about the Teen Advisory Board is that it really is an advisory board. I mean, even I talk to our advisors, our teen advisors, regularly. We meet monthly. Before COVID, we would meet in person a couple times a year. I'm sure we'll get back to that when it's safe. But I think I've had one-on-one calls with every single one of our new advisors to this year. We sort of use this board to make sure that we're on target, right? That we are responding to what girls in that year, are caring most about. And again, the world has changed so much in the last 9 months, let alone how different, even our Teen Advisory Board was 10 years ago. The issues that are at the forefront, the conversations, the way that young people are interacting in the world. I mean, when we started Girl Up, there was no Instagram. And now almost all of our engagement with our girl community is on Instagram.
Yeah.
There was no Snapchat, there was no TikTok, right? I think Twitter was just getting going. I remember celebrating 100,000 fans on Facebook and thinking that was the most amazing thing. Now we have almost 1.3 million social media followers, but you can even watch the progression of innovation of technology and think about how much that has changed. And so that Teen Advisory Board class each year and being able to be so close to the staff are really our temperature gauge on, are we talking about the right issues? Are we putting forth the right actions? Are we having the right conversations? Are we speaking out when we need to? Are we speaking out in a way that, we have to fall in line with the UN Foundation, but that our girl community is expecting us to? And, sometimes it's hard feedback. Sometimes it's like, yes, keep going that way. Sometimes it's like, no, that is not how we feel, and you're a little off. Or, hey, girl up, you need to like get with us in this. You need to catch up. And I truly believe that the reason we have made it to 10 years, the reason that we have had the global success that we've had and we've grown the way that we've grown, is because we have listened to a group of girls that has changed and evolved with the times, and has led Girl Up as an organization to change and evolve with the girls. And that's been really key to all of the impact that we've had as an organization.
As a member of Gen Z, I am very appreciative of this global board, because we have so many ideas and so many visions, but we don't have the direction, and sometimes we just don't know what to do. So with this two-way that we give you ideas, and that members of this board give Girl Up ideas, and Girl Up give them ideas, and we're able to communicate, it's so empowering, and it's just great to know that there is a way to learn, and there is a way to voice your concerns, and to make your dreams, and to make the change come true. I love the idea of the Teen Advisor Board. It's amazing, and as you've said, the girls on this board are phenomenal. Getting to speak with them, it's amazing, and it's insightful. I think I have the most interesting conversations with them. They're just lovely. I digress. I know that recently the Teen Advisor Board, they got to collaborate with Montclair. Girl Up collaborated with Montclair to celebrate Day of the Girl, and this was so uplifting. Again, I love these girls, and I'd seen the photos and seen the growth and the knowledge that these alumni have gained over the years. It's just been so amazing. And I want to know, what does Day of the Girl mean to you, as well as seeing your girls, the Teen Advisor Board, be the representatives of Day of the Girl?
Yeah. No, I mean, Day of the Girl it's the day that validates the work and the importance of girls. So again, when I joined Girl Up, there wasn't an International Day of the Girl. The first year that we actually commemorated International Day of the Girl set by the UN was in 2012. And it was amazing. And so many organizations that precede Girl Up fought for that day. We were not involved in that. We weren't actually sort of in existence yet, but Plan International, our UN partners, and many others were really the forces behind getting that day, that day as a UN day, as a global commemoration. And I remember feeling like, okay, in those early days, I was really making the case a lot of the time. I was spending a lot of my time with adults and girls and funders and companies being like, why should you invest in girls? That was how we spent a lot of time in those first couple years. And the UN marking a day for adolescent girls was a very helpful validation of of just the importance and the opportunity, and how that specific time in our lives is so key to what happens next. Able to stay in school, if we don't have to get married and have kids, if we're able to sort of exist in the world free from violence, if we have access to information about our bodies and what's happening to us as adolescents, our trajectory and our opportunity is limitless. And so the fact that I was trying to convince people of that, and then the UN sort of ratified this day and made this a moment, it just really helped catalyze all of this effort. And then, we're a huge external facing brand. We engage with all these high level speakers and brands like Montclair and Hillary Clinton and Meghan Markle and all of these people. So having a day where you can bring the entire global community of organizations, of companies, of leaders, of individuals, of girls, of moms and dads, and everybody can actually sort of put their hands up and celebrate girl power, and have a day that we all do that as a global community. We just built the momentum and who engages and how has built year over year over year, to the point that you can't even actually stand out on that day. It's just cool, we're all in this surge of girl power together. And the fact that we've actually grown to that point, it's World Health Day, or peace. These moments where like they're not singular to any certain organization because they've grown past that. And I feel like that's where we are with Day of the Girl, and that's really where we are in the evolution of the value of a girl. Like that's the one piece that I think we can really be proud of that Girl Up has contributed to over our first 10 years is that I don't have to make the case anymore. The case is case closed, but the work continues because the realities haven't changed. But the case has been made, and the world now sees the contribution that girls can make now and that they will make as women, and they're listening and they're valuing that. And I think Day of the Girl has been a big part of that trajectory. I think it's up to everyone to say, great, now we need to change. Now we need to change the realities. Now we need to change the experience. We need to see the statistics improve. We need to see the lived experience of girls improve, because now we all know better. So if it took us 10 years to know better, now we know, and now the work ahead is, okay, now we have to change the reality. In 10 years, I don't want to look back and have the same conversation. I want to see actual, real changes happening, and this is just as hard of a fight as getting people to value girls, but now we actually have to get the lived experiences to be different.
I think a recurring theme is that we've had to educate girls to understand their worth, know their rights, know just how much more they can do. And Girl Up does that so well, because there's so much that as a girl I've learned about myself that I know I might not have learned without having to dig a little deeper and take the time to learn these things. And I think it's really unfortunate that globally there are approximately 130 million girls who don't have access to education. And that hurts so much to know that that's over 100 million girls who could have been future lawyers, future presidents, change makers. It's really upsetting. And I know that part of Girls' mission is to change this, is to bring those numbers down, is to be able to educate girls on finding themselves, finding their voices, and their academia. What does it mean to you? How important is educating a girl, and what do you know educating a girl can do?
I mean, education is the beginning, it's the middle, it's the end, it's the fundamental aspect of all of this. If you are choosing to allow your child to gain education, you have valued her. You have valued her as something more than a childbearer, someone more than a mouth to feed, someone more than a body to do work and bring income into your house. You have actually valued her as a human, as a contributor, as an individual. If you are allowed, because in some parts of the world, those are the decisions you're making. You might have to choose between sending her to school or having her out working, to make money. But if you're choosing to let her go to school, you're valuing her. If you're choosing to make her work, you're not valuing her and her potential and her future and her opportunity. So I think for me, there is no women leadership. There is no change in equality for the rest of the world and you and me, and we live in places where education is a right and it is a requirement. We have the privilege of being required to be in school. In other parts of the world, these are like life and death fights to be able to go to school. So until that is actually realized, all of these fights for equality will be in vain. And I think that what I always go back to fundamentally is how you actually value someone are the choices that you make for them and the opportunities that you give them. And if you value your child, your girl child, in your community, in your family, in your country, in the world, you're going to set them up to be able to have a better future than they have as a present. If you don't value them, you're not committed to making that change for them. And so I think that is just such a fundamental road to empowerment and necessity for actual understanding to dream, understanding of your power, of your agency, of your ability, but also it's fundamental to actually getting women to the places where they can be the decision makers, they can be the community leaders, they can be the elected officials that will then put the policies in place, enforce those policies, and actually allow us to start to see some of those realities change. So literally none of this happens without education. And if girls are not in school, then they are in situations that put them in harm's way or that prove that they're not valued. And so for me, it is just absolutely fundamental.
I agree. It's fundamental. It is the first thing. It paves the way for our futures. And being educated helps you make independent decisions and to understand on a broader level what's going on in the world. All of that knowledge is so important.
And I'd love to share one lesson that I learned in this idea of just how education fundamentally shifts who we are internally. So one of my incredible life experiences was to travel to Ethiopia with UNHCR and visit refugee camps in Jijiga region of Ethiopia. And these were refugees from Somalia. And it was a refugee settlement that had been there for 20 years. Some of these girls were born and raised. That's the only life they knew. Others had settled more recently and knew a different life. And in Ethiopia, refugees at that time, I believe it's starting to change, or there's some conversations around changing this policy, but at the time, refugees were not allowed to work in Ethiopia. They could live there, and the country would host them and help support, their livelihood, but they weren't actually able to legally work, so they weren't taking away jobs from Ethiopian citizens. So there was this huge effort that we have supported for years and years and years with our fundraising with Girl Up on girls' education within those refugee settlements within that specific region. So I got to travel there and visit the classrooms and visit the girls and talk to the girls themselves, those that were in school and those that were not. And the extreme contrast of girls who were in school learning, thriving, top of their class, not top girl, but top student, the confidence, the light, the spirit that, like you and I, right, we lived that. And here's these girls having the exact same experience with no future guarantee of any kind of employment coming out of that education. The education is solely for the purpose of education. And contrasting that with young women who were not in school because they didn't see the point, because there was no way that it would actually further their opportunity. And what I took away from that trip and from that experience meeting those girls who sort of had a different argument to be made. Like, we say go get an education because then you can get a job, you can have an income, you can have autonomy and independence as a woman. That wasn't actually the argument for these girls in this situation. But the new argument was your sense of self.
Yes.
You learned, you achieved, you believed in yourself, you pushed yourself, you tried, and you succeeded. And who you are as a human, when you have seen yourself achieve something, and you have pushed yourself, and you have succeeded, and the light and the confidence and the total shift of who you are as a person is improved. Versus someone who has never had that experience and does not actually value themselves enough to say, I just want that for me, because they don't know any different. And that, to me, became an even more fundamental reason for education, kind of to your point, Mofiyin, and even what you shared about your own, our own education. I saw that of like, yeah, there's this greater economic, argument that we can make. There's this, like, how do we get in positions of leadership and decision-making argument we can make, but there is like that fundamental, what does it mean to learn? What does it mean to know? And how does being able to learn and know change you as a human? And I got to see that live in person in this just very unique situation where that actually was the only goal. And it was amazing. It was beautiful. And it was something that I very much took with me to just kind of layer on even additional importance to the idea of education.
It's definitely a matter of knowledge being power, and thank you so much for sharing that, because hearing about how the girls that you met value their education for more than the means of getting a job and for excelling in ranks of his power, it's so valuable to be able to understand yourself to be able to relate with others. It's amazing and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story, Melissa, and I really wish that I were able to go to Ethiopia with you and visit these girls, and those are only dreams of the future for now. But I just also wanted to touch on the fact that these past 10 years have been amazing, and I know moving forward, Girl Up has so many more plans. You've recently started the Girls Equal Change campaign, and I am so excited to see how that goes and to see how many more lives you impact. And I know I keep on saying that you impact more and more lives, but for someone who watch girls enter a club and grow and see how Girl Up affects the lives of girls globally, including mine, it's a privilege and it's so, so beautiful. So I do want to say thank you for your work with Girl Up and thank you for all that you and Girl Up continue to do. I know I've been aided with skills for the rest of my life and introduced to fierce women who have lifted me up and up and up. And I just hope that people do go and find out more about Girl Up and they join the movement. I think it's now time that I do ask you to write your letter to self, just about the person you hope to become and the advice you'd give yourself. And hopefully at some point in maybe a year's time we can look back on this and see, what was I like back then, and have I been able to accomplish what it is that I wrote down in this letter?
So I'm going to give myself some advice that I give girls all the time. So, dear me, be ambitious. Do not shy away from your ambition for Girl Up, your ambition for girls, for what the future can be, and for yourself, your ambition for what your role in that change can be. Be open, listen, be a servant leader always, and allow yourself the grace and the space to continue to learn from the girls of Girl Up, who will teach you what they need, how to move, how to evolve, and where to go. Love you, girl, Melissa.
That was beautiful, Melissa. Thank you so, so much. And I do hope that at the back of your mind you strive to do all those things in your letter, which I'm pretty sure I know you will do. Thank you so much for spending your time on my podcast with me, and I hope our listeners have learned so much more about what it means to be a girl and what a girl can do. And go read up about Girl Up and join the movement. I can't emphasize this enough. It is a life changer, changing lives of many. Oh, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And congratulations on your podcast. I'm super proud of you and super honored to be your first guest. And I hope that it grows and grows and is hugely successful.